Hello, welcome back. So I wanted to go over a video today of something that came to light between the Anaheim and Vegas Golden Knights trade that happened on trade deadline. So for anyone who's not currently aware, Vegas tried to trade Anaheim Evgeny Dadonov in exchange for John Moore and Ryan Kesler, whose contract is currently on LTIR. He is not expected to play in the NHL again because of a career-ending injury, so it was likely that that lump of money was going to go into LTIR, and Vegas was going to be done with it. The problem is that when Dadonov signed his $5 million contract with Ottawa, there was a no-trade list in there in which Dadonov submitted a 10-team list to Ottawa that was filed on time. Now, that being said, it was up for debate for the longest time. The NHL wound up stepping in and going, nope, this was submitted on time. We do have the list. This is not a valid trade. So John Moore and Ryan Kesler go back to Anaheim. Dadonov does go back to the Golden Knights. This kind of raises the question, is there a centralized place where no movement clauses, contracts that are held? Or is it held by the franchise? And if so, why was that not sent to Vegas by Ottawa when Dadonov was traded over there? A whole lot of questions in there. We could speculate forever. I'm sure there will be more that will come to light from this because it has been a 48-hour debacle. It does sound like Dadonov will be in the Golden Knights lineup as of tomorrow night or today, depending when you view this video. If you're viewing this after March 24th, 2022, then it's in the past. So this does also bring up a couple other things. Vegas was using this trade as an opportunity to clear up some cap space, which they desperately need. Granted that they have players on LTIR and they are not small players. So Vegas currently, as it stands, has $3.2 million of cap space to get them through till the end of the year. So they have not accrued that yet. That is the money that they accrue for the team as they go along. That actually isn't a whole lot. The big problem does come down to Mark Stone and Alec Martinez. Those two are currently on long-term LTIR, which they are getting cap relief for. If they don't find a way to clear up cap space for them to come back, these two players will not be able to return during the regular season. Once the playoffs hit, then the cap space is no longer salary cap, is no longer in place. So all players are eligible to play. That being said, with Dadonov back, that actually does help Vegas right now because he is a goal scorer. That is something that they do need. So without Dadonov there to help, there's a good chance they may not even make the playoffs, at which point this whole argument becomes moot, and Mark Stone and Alec Martinez remain on LTIR until the end of the season, and then they go golfing once the regular season does end. Or whatever they do with their spare time, I don't know. That being said, if Vegas does make the playoffs, that asks a much heftier question. Because we see that there is $14.75 million tied up in these players, Vegas is currently sitting rest right up against the cap, then these two players will make it so that Vegas is over the salary cap walking into the playoffs. We did see this happen in Chicago. I want to say it was 2015. I can't remember what year it was, but they went into the playoffs a few $1 million over the current cap. That being said, $3 million, most teams could look at that and go, it's largely inconsequential. Tampa, most notably, last season was $18 million over the cap, largely due to the same situation. Where two players were on LTIR, they were ready for the playoffs, they came back, and now we're doing this again in 2022. Without Mark Stone and Alec Martinez in the lineup, it is hard to say whether Vegas will be able to maintain pace to even make the playoffs at all. I would think that if, for whatever reason, Vegas does make it to the, whether it's wild card or third in the Pacific, whatever position they would wind up getting if they do make the playoffs. If they go on a deep run, conference final, Stanley Cup final, a lot of people are going to put a large asterisk right around any accomplishment that they make in the postseason. That being said, I don't know what the protocol is or if there is going to be a correction in the next collective bargaining agreement or anything. But the fact that 2 years in a row, if this does happen, that we have teams that are 15 and $18 million over the cap walking in, is that cap circumvention? Are these timeframes going to get pushed out to where the players are deemed not able to return till the playoffs? Questions like that are going to start getting asked because we don't really have a clear definition on return to play. The player does need to be cleared by a doctor, but there's so many parts in there that you can raise questions as to, is this a legitimate time frame? When we look at time frames and they say, okay, well, the player's out 6 weeks, and then all of a sudden their time frame becomes 5 weeks or 7 weeks. That's not that unusual. But if, say, Stone was to be cleared 3 weeks before the end of the regular season and is eligible to play, are they required to make that cap space for him? That may actually be an already answered question. I'm not entirely sure. That is something I'll look into because I didn't think we would be running into the same situation 1 year after it already went up in arms. That being said, if there isn't, for my money, I think there should be a clause in there that if a player is cleared to play, they are legitimately okay to play. The team is required to honor contracts until everybody is in place. So ideally, you don't want Mark Stone trying to clear waivers, but do you move enough players to through waivers to get him into the lineup? And then Alec Martinez likewise. So it raises a bunch of questions that I think are going to be very uncomfortable for everybody over the foreseeable future. At this point, unless Mark Stone and Alec Martinez return to the lineup before it's too late in the postseason, it does not, for my money, look like Vegas will even make the playoffs. I could be wrong. That's just one poor man's opinion. Let me know if you have any other thoughts on it or if you disagree with my outlook. It would be one of those instances where Vegas finally sees that taste of defeat that they haven't yet, because they've made the postseason every year that they've been around so far. So who knows how that they'll handle that. I don't think that it's out of the question for them to make the playoffs, but just based on what I'm seeing, it seems incredibly unlikely. When you grant that Alec Martinez is a top 2 defenseman, Mark Stone's the captain and first line player, that's a lot to be out on LTIR running down the last stretch of the regular season. And it's a time in the year when you need all the help you can get, especially in the Pacific. Over in the East, the teams making the playoffs already decided. It's just a question of what position they're going to be in walking into the playoffs. The Pacific doesn't have that luxury. The Central doesn't have that luxury. You've got five, 6 teams clamoring for 2 spots now. So we'll see how this pans out. I do, again, very much think that the NHL will have something substantial to say on this. I don't think they'll say it readily. I think it'll have to get pulled out of them. But this does feel like if these players are expected to return and they don't, it is that cap circumvention. And it's not a question we can entirely address now, but that could be a video for later on. That being said, if I remember correctly, Toronto, to a lesser degree, is looking at the same situation with Jake Muzzin being on LTIR right now, and I think they're pushed right up against the cap as well. It's not $14 million, but at this point, it gets so competitive and the business is so deep running that even $1 over seems like something that somebody would try to argue. So we'll see how this all pans out. I hope it doesn't become a detractor or distraction for any team, whether it's Anaheim, Vegas, or anybody that's involved around them either. But I'd like to know what anyone else thinks on this situation. Apparently, there's a thing called post-deadline deals. I don't know. It's a weird rule that I have to look into. It's just something I had browsed across on Twitter, so I'll look into that. Maybe there's a reasonable solution to all this, but as it stands, it doesn't look like Mark Stone or Alec Martinez are going to be able to come back to the lineup before the end of the regular season without at least a handful of players having to clear waivers. So we'll see how Vegas handles that. But I at this point would think that this is kind of worst case scenario for them, and the bad business practice really looks bad on the franchise, especially given their transaction history over the last couple years. So again, let me know what you think. That's just my thoughts on it. I do think Vegas misses the playoffs because of this, but I could be wrong, and I'm never upset when I'm wrong during hockey. So yeah, drop a comment. If you guys did like the video, please drop a like. If you'd like to see more, please drop a subscribe. And I'll catch you on the next one, hopefully sooner rather than later. Until then, thank you, and all the best.